September 1997, backstage at the Mr. Olympia, the largest bodybuilding contest in the world, a man can barely lift his own arm. His left tricep is hanging by a thread, almost completely torn from the bone. The stage lights are minutes away, and no one in the audience is aware of it. No one knows that the most feared physique in the world is being held together by stubbornness and painkillers. That night, he would walk out, hit his poses, and win his 6th consecutive Mr. Olympia title. He would then leave competitive bodybuilding for good. For nearly 30 years, fans have debated why Dorian Yates retired so abruptly at his peak. Now at 64, the man known as the Shadow has spoken about it directly. His account is uglier, stranger, and more honest than most expected. To understand how it ended, it helps to understand who he was, because little about Dorian Yates fit the bodybuilding mold of his era. He was not a California beach figure. He was not a showman. He grew up on a small farm in rural Staffordshire, lost his father at 13, and was sent to an English youth detention center as a teenager, after a series of run-ins with the law. That detention center is where he first picked up a barbell. By 21, he was training in a cold concrete basement called Temple Gym in Birmingham. There were no mirrors, no music, no audience, and no tolerance for anyone who could not keep up. While much of the bodybuilding world was based in Venice Beach, posing for magazines, Yates trained alone in the dark, recording every set, every rep, and every meal in a notebook with methodical precision. He did not arrive early at contests. He did not trade insults with rivals. He simply appeared, defeated the field, and returned to England. That is the origin of the nickname, the Shadow, a competitor opponents rarely saw before the stage. The same approach that made him unbeatable was also undermining his career from within. That is where the rest of the story begins. Dorian Yates rejected the standard training methods of 90s bodybuilding. Most of the top competitors at the time were in the gym 6 days a week, sometimes twice a day, performing 20 or more sets per body part. Yates discarded that approach entirely. He adopted an obscure philosophy developed by Mike Mentzer called high-intensity training, now commonly referred to as HT, and pushed it to an extreme. His workouts lasted under an hour. He performed one warm-up set, occasionally two, followed by a single working set taken well past failure. His training partner often had to physically pull the bar off him at the end of a set. Each body part was trained once per week. The results were significant. He built up to 270 pounds of dense, grainy muscle and maintained that conditioning year-round. The combination of size and hardness he achieved had not been seen before, and it shaped what became known as the mass monster era of bodybuilding. What he has only fully acknowledged in recent years is that this level of intensity, sustained for more than a decade with no off-season, was not something the human body was built to withstand. He was lifting heavy weights to absolute muscular failure on a physique already pushed to its chemical and biological limits. Each repetition carried a cost, and eventually that cost came due. The first significant warning came in 1994, 3 years into his Olympia reign. While preparing for that year's contest, training in the same style that had built him, his left bicep tore during a heavy set. It was a full tear, not a strain. In interviews, he has said he was devastated. He spent several days at home considering whether to withdraw from the Olympia, believing his career might already be finished. The bicep was visibly deformed, and the shape remains evident in photographs from that period. He did not withdraw. He adjusted his training, worked around the injury, and competed at the Olympia that year. He won, and he won again the following 3 years. From the outside, it appeared he had recovered. The bicep, however, never healed properly. The shape was permanently altered. The deeper issue was that the training style and lifestyle that had caused the tear remained unchanged. He returned to lifting heavy weights to failure on the same arm, year-round. He has since stated that he ignored what his body was indicating because he was at the top of the sport and unwilling to step away from it. Looking back, he describes the bicep tear as the moment he should have recognized the warning. There was another element of his preparation he kept private for years. When he eventually addressed it, the bodybuilding world paid close attention. For most of his career, when journalists asked him about chemical assistance, Yates was famously diplomatic. He gave vague answers, mentioned that everyone in the sport used something, and moved on. That approach shifted after his retirement. In a London Real interview that has since become widely cited, he sat down and stated it plainly. He said he used steroids on and off from his amateur days in 1985 through his retirement in 1997. 12 years of consistent use. He talked openly about the side effects he experienced, including water retention, acne, and elevated aggression, which he said he channeled into his training. Tumulty. In 2019, he went further. He stated that the doses he had publicly listed before were not the full picture. For his 1997 Olympia preparation specifically, the final year, the year of the tear, he confirmed he had pushed the chemicals harder than in any previous prep, and that he had added insulin to the protocol on top of everything else. In a 2019 Muscular Development interview, he said he used higher amounts of drugs than what he had previously listed, and that this was during preparation for the 1997 Mr. Olympia, with steroid doses increased and insulin added. He has not blamed the drugs alone for what happened. He has argued the opposite, that compared to the lifestyle damage of fast food culture, his usage was relatively controlled. What he has acknowledged is that the combination of pushing chemical limits while pushing training intensity to inhuman levels, while running no off-season, while approaching 40, was a load the body could not sustain indefinitely. In 1997, multiple things gave at nearly the same time. This portion of the story is rarely covered. The tricep tear is well known. The months leading up to it are not. By 1997, Dorian Yates was no longer the hungry kid from Birmingham who lived to lift. He was a businessman, a father, the most famous bodybuilder in the world, and increasingly a man who was exhausted. He has said in multiple recent interviews that bodybuilding had stopped feeling like a passion and had started feeling like a job. He was going through the motions and the fire was flickering. His body then began to break down in ways the public did not see. Weeks before his final Olympia, he was hospitalized with internal bleeding in his stomach. The reigning Mr. Olympia, weeks out from defending his title, was in a hospital bed with a bleeding stomach. He has connected this to the cumulative stress of years of extreme dieting, supplementation, training, and the chemical load on his organs. He recovered enough to leave the hospital and return to his prep. He told almost no one. He kept his head down and continued working toward the show, because that was the pattern he had always followed. His body was sending a clear warning, and he chose not to act on it because he was 3 weeks out from the Olympia. Then in the gym doing what he had always done. The warning was no longer subtle. The lift was routine. Cable work for triceps. He has described it many times over the years, and the details barely change. He felt a pop, then a strange wet sensation under the skin, then the kind of pain that drops grown men. He went to get it scanned, and the doctors gave him news that should have ended any rational athlete's preparation on the spot. His tricep was torn almost completely off the bone, 3 weeks out from the Olympia. Roughly 95% of the tendon in his arm had detached. He could not contract the muscle properly. For a normal pro, that would mean withdrawal, surgery, rehab, and possibly a year off. For Dorian, it meant something different. He had won 5 Olympias in a row. He had a 6th title to defend. He had built his identity, his business, and his entire adult life around being Mr. Olympia. So he made a decision that, to this day, divides bodybuilding fans. He decided to compete anyway. He restructured his entire training, effectively abandoning the left arm, dieted down on momentum and willpower, and walked on stage with a destroyed tricep that he had to consciously hide from the judges. He won, by the thinnest of margins. The hardness was off, the fullness was off, the arm was not right, and people noticed. But he won the Sandow Trophy, 6 in a row. In that moment, even as his hand was being raised, he already knew. He has said it bluntly, in interview after interview. Standing on that stage, he knew that was it. He was not going to top it. He could not even fully contract his own arm. The body that had carried him to the top of the sport had finally, completely refused to keep going. He calls it a forced exit. The decision was already made for him. He just had to admit it out loud. The damage did not stop when he stopped competing. The tear healed technically, but it healed wrong. The shape of the muscle was never the same. In recent years, he has talked openly about what his body actually feels like at 64. He has the permanent bicep deformity from 1994. He has the tricep deformity from 1997. He has a partially torn supraspinatus in his shoulder from years of heavy pressing, an injury that predated his retirement and never improved. He has chronic issues on his entire left side. He has said that even 5 years before retirement age, he was still trying to do bodybuilding style training, but it was extremely limited because of the bicep, the tricep, and the shoulder injuries. Eventually, he had to give up bodybuilding style lifting altogether. The man who pioneered the mass monster era, who could deadlift weights that would humble most powerlifters, can no longer train the way he built his body. He does yoga every day, Pilates, swimming, hiking, light kettlebell work. He has stated publicly that his cardio and flexibility today are better than when he was 30, but he also acknowledges that he cannot go back to the old style without making things worse. The career did not simply end in 1997. The cost of that career has been quietly compounding for almost 30 years. For a long time, he was bitter about it. He has said so himself. He felt cheated. He felt the sport had taken something from him. But somewhere along the way, something shifted, and what he says now is the most surprising part of the story. At 64, Dorian Yates lives a life that would have been unrecognizable to the man who walked off the stage in 1997. He left England and spent years living between Spain and Costa Rica. He moved deeply into yoga and meditation to the point where it stopped being a hobby and became the center of how he lives. He became one of the most public bodybuilding figures to openly discuss psychedelics. He has spoken on Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss, the Huberman Lab, and London Real about ayahuasca, DMT, and plant medicine retreats. He helps run ayahuasca camps in Costa Rica, where in his own words, he has watched people rewrite their lives in a single week. He is a cannabis advocate, and he believes most people barely scratch the surface of consciousness itself. He has called his career-ending injury a blessing in disguise. He has said that if his tricep had not given out in 1997, he would have kept going. He would have kept training that hard, kept dieting that extreme, and kept pushing chemically deeper into his 40s, and he is not sure he would still be alive. He looks at some of the bodybuilders from his generation and the generations after, the ones who could not stop, the ones whose health collapsed in their 50s or who did not make it that far at all, and he sees what he might have become. The injury that destroyed his career, in his own telling, may have saved his life. When people ask what actually ended his bodybuilding career, the simple answer is the tricep tear. The fuller answer is everything that led up to it, the training style that made him a champion and slowly broke his body, the chemicals he will not pretend he did not use, the off-seasons he refused to take, the hospital bed nobody saw, and the bicep he ignored in 1994. A man who pushed himself that hard for that long eventually had nothing left but to come apart from the inside. He does not regret any of it, and he does not romanticize it either. 6 Mr. Olympia titles came at a price, and he has spent the last 30 years working out what that price actually was. The Shadow, the most feared bodybuilder of his era, appears more at ease now in yoga pants on a beach in Costa Rica than he ever did holding the Sandow Trophy. For anyone chasing greatness, that alone is reason to consider what they are willing to trade for it.